in Brazil. They are enforcing a ruling by this guy, Justice Alexander de Moraes, to censor X. It's essentially a censoring of X, even though...
Se você ainda não é inscrito no canal, se inscreva, ative o sino da notificação e compartilhe com o maior número de pessoas.
Meanwhile, as Elon Musk makes gains in outer space, his social media app X is being stopped short in Brazil as the country is blocking its citizens from going on the platform. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr has been outspoken about this ban's threat to free speech, and he joins us now. Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. Now, you wrote a letter on September 5th to the head of Anatel. He's I guess, kind of your equivalent in Brazil. They are enforcing a ruling by this guy, Justice Alexander de Moraes, to censor X. It's essentially a censoring of X, even though that censoring violates the Brazilian Constitution itself, the Constitution Justice Moraes is supposed to defend. Isn't the real problem Justice Moraes and not the head of Anatel?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Ultimately, Anatel is the one that's enforcing it, and they're my regulatory counterparts there, so that was an appropriate place to start to speak up was to them directly. But this is a really concerning story that has lots of elements to it. On the one hand, it looks like it's part of this global surge in censorship that we're seeing taking place across the world, and it is. But it's also a real concern for doing business in Brazil. If you look at business leaders in the U.S. like Bill Ackman, he's questioned whether this decision puts Brazil on the path to becoming uninvestable. And I think he's right, because not only did they go after X in violation of Brazil's own constitution, in my view, but they went after Starlink, which is a separate company with different shareholders, and froze their assets. That's a very concerning move if you're doing business in Brazil to see that.
Well, it was a punitive move. That's clear. It had nothing to do with the violation. But even the order itself, you say, violates due process. How does it do that?
Yeah, leading up to this decision, they were issuing a series of secret orders directing X and other social media companies to censor the political opponents in government. So the Brazilian senators and representatives that are in opposition to Brazil's incumbent government, the Lula administration. And only when X said, look, we're not going to do this in secret, did they start to take these punitive actions. And if you look at the underlying judicial decision, it mentions in 13 or 14 different places Bolsonaro administration, and notes the fact that these authorizations that Starlink got were issued under the prior administration, which certainly leaves one with the impression that any sort of market access or authorizations you got during the last administration, maybe they're not as good under the current Lula regime. And I think that's why you're seeing these broader business level concerns about doing business there. I think Brazil is really putting itself in the conversation with other authoritarian nations right now, whether it's North Korea or Russia, just like Bill Ackman has pointed out.
Well, I know Lula. I've interviewed him before, decades ago, actually, when he was running about 30 years ago, 35 years ago in Brazil. He's a Marxist, and he believes in the policy, but he has sort of managed to segue into the political mainstream right now in Brazil. I mean, is it the whole system that is the problem, or does it rest with Lula himself?
I think it's a mix between this one particular justice that you mentioned, De Moraes. In fact, there's been impeachment efforts against him over this and massive protests in Brazil. Those impeachment efforts were unsuccessful, but I think the protests will continue. And again, if you look at his decision, he said he's acting to prevent the incitement of anti-democratic acts. But if you then follow through, the actual thing he's worried about is people voting the wrong way. That's the anti-democratic act he has in mind. In fact, his decision cites to Brexit in President Trump's election here in 2016 as reasons for censoring speech. He doesn't want populist results at the ballot box. But this merger between Lula and Justice De Moraes should be a real worrying sign for the business community. Again, if you're there in Brazil right now, you got to consider this.
And it should be a worrying sign for us, too, particularly because there was at least one former Democratic leader who was praising this decision to censor X and Elon Musk. And I'm just wondering if you have any pushback, your letter got any pushback within the FCC with other commissioners of the FCC, or are you all united in protesting what's going on in Brazil?
Yeah, that response that you mentioned from a Democrat lawmaker or former lawmakers is very shocking. I haven't heard from my FCC colleagues about this particular one. But look, I think the administration's own silence on this is very, very concerning. I mean, we need to be at the State Department level lodging concerns about this. Look, I'm one commissioner, I'm a Republican, I'm in the minority. Maybe I don't have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to this issue, but I'm going to stand on it anyways because I think it's very important that we look out for sort of reciprocity. We have a relationship with Brazil. They have access to our markets, but they need to treat, companies with U.S. ties fairly. That's not happening right now.
Finally, and it's got to be quick, your last sentence is, I therefore request a meeting with you to address and resolve these issues. If you prefer, I will come to you in Brazil to do so. It's a kind offer of yours. It was September 5th. Have you heard anything from him?
I haven't yet, but I'll send another email today following up and see when they're available. But the offer still stands. I'm happy to come down there and address this directly with them.
All right. And we are happy to have you on anytime you have more information about this. Commissioner Carr, great to see you. Good work you're doing. We appreciate you coming in.
Não se esqueça de deixar o seu like, se inscrever no canal, ativar o sino da notificação e compartilhar com o maior número de pessoas. Forte abraço, fiquem com Deus.